that much fear. Just go to the hive. So, you know, bees, they play a role, obviously, in our environment. They pollinate our crops, they pollinate our flowers. You know, in industrial ag, there's certain things that have to have pollinators to produce fruit. And then there's others that don't. You know, most grains are wind pollinators, so they don't really need pollinators. So, you know, these bees were brought from Europe. They're called European honeybees. So when we hear the word honeybee, they're European honeybees. They're from Europe. They evolved there along with bees that a strain of them that went down into Africa, which are called Africanized bees. And unfortunately, the media, you know, took that situation and called them killer bees, because, you know, people were dying, animals were dying, things like that. And those bees were originally brought from Africa to Brazil because they're highly productive bees. They multiply very quickly, which means that they split. So you can end up with, you know, one hive of Africanized bees, and it can split multiple times in a season. So you can see, if you were a beekeeper and you wanted many hives, you could use that behavior and create lots of hives. They're really hard to manage. But they have been working with Africanized bees in Africa for thousands of years, not hundreds of years, but thousands of years. They're manageable if you really know what you're doing, but their behavior is completely different than the European honeybees. So if you're going to learn how to do beekeeping, you definitely just want to focus on friendly bees, you know. And so you don't even want to, like, you know, you'll hear some people that are beekeeping with Africanized bees. So I would definitely just not bother with that. And if you happen to run across bees that are aggressive, you should let them go. You know, I do bee rescue, and sometimes there's really aggressive bees that we find, and we eliminate them by using a shop vacuum. We suck them up, and we don't spray anything. But they're so mean. It's on occasion it's either you or them. They can be that aggressive. So, but I try not to do any killing of bees ever. There's this question about, do we really need bees? You know, I'm talking about honeybees, you know, European honeybees. And we've been taught that, you know, the way that they grow almonds and other things, they grow this big monocrops of plants that where they have just hundreds of acres of one variety of crop, and they're pollinated by insects that they have to ship bees in. Well, they've created this model that they kind of are forced to, because they don't have any other types of plants that are going to support any pollinators through any other season of the year. They're keeping it completely sterile and weed-free. But if they were just to do what they do in England, where they have hedgerows and all kinds of native habitat that are left there for the native wildlife, then you don't really have to have European honeybees. Our native pollinators are incredibly efficient pollinators, much more efficient, believe it or not, than European honeybees. For a lot of reasons. Our native pollinators are, plants and insects co-evolve. Plants that flower, they co-evolve with certain insects that match right up to those flowers, and they pollinate them very quickly and efficiently. But that doesn't mean that we can't just put European honeybees in those crops and those other plants and get them to pollinate those plants. They will. We're kind of forcing them on this other diet, and we're forcing them to pollinate those crops. They'll do it, but they're not as efficient. And European honeybees get up really late. They really do. They sleep until like 10 in the morning. Our native pollinators, they get up super early, and often they're up just at dawn, right before the sun comes up. And the native pollinators, if there's a good quantity of them, they're up. If there's habitat for them, they're up. They've pollinated the crops before the European honeybees got up. So you'll see, if you look into it, there's a lot of controversies about, do we really need European honeybees? And we could actually come up with a way of not even having to use them and manipulate them and bring hives in. There's lots and lots of models that people are doing. So I just want to throw that out because it's kind of surprising to a lot of people. So this is a European honeybee on some buckwheat up in Julian. Like I said, do we really need, do we really need them as pollinators? Do we need them as, because they're really considered a livestock, because they're going to produce a number of things. A lot of times people think, well, bees just do two things. They pollinate crops and they make honey. But actually they're a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's a huge industry. And it's all because of the invention of this box, and all these frames, and all these parts that fit in here. This is a commercial way to do this, and as soon as you decide, I'm going to do it this way, then this hobby or this possible venture you're going to do is going to cost you money. You're stuck into this box, and you got to buy everything. You can do it in many, many other ways, and I would highly encourage you to look into an alternative way to doing beekeeping. This works perfectly fine, unless you get lots of free boxes or a good carpenter, or this will just continue nickel and dime you, not to death, but you're just hooked into this commercial system. You got to keep buying, buying, buying. If you look into a beekeeper catalog, wow, there's so many toys you want. So many little doodads that'll make your job easier and easier and easier. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it because it's very efficient, it works really good. But if you want to go another way, you can go with other types of systems that are called top bar systems, the top bar hive. And they can be very technical or they can be very simple. And it's a way of understanding bees' behavior and using their behavior to your advantage. And there's these really simple types of hives. This is a super, I'm just going to show you this real quick, super simple version of the top bar hive. And all I did was this is a tree bucket, 15-gallon tree bucket. And what I do is I take some of this blue painter's tape, I tape up the holes on the bottom, and I use this because it's removable. Tape up the holes and I use it as a bucket. Often I'm collecting a swarm. The swarm is hanging from a branch of a tree. I shake them off, I put a piece of material over the top of this, and I take them home. And then I made these little, this was a 2x4 that I just cut into little strips. So it was a 2x4 this way. I cut it into these strips. Then I cut a notch down the center. And then I took a piece of this foundation. This is called foundation. And you can get it in wax or plastic. And then I shove it into that crack. And this is just the same thickness of a saw blade, of a circular saw. And this will shove in there and you tap it in and it'll fit in there and be snug. Like this here. So now, what I've done is I've given them a spot to make their honeycomb. I take 6 of these and I set them right here on top of this bucket. And they're just laid right across that. You can see that that honeycomb's hanging down there. I have 6 of these that sit across. And it doesn't cover the whole thing, so then I cut these little fence boards. They sit right on the side, so this whole thing ends up being covered with all these combs that are sitting slight distance away from each other. I'll show you real quick.
Oh, that doesn't get too hot for them?
Nope, you put it in the shade. Beekeeping is a good idea. You would never put any kind of pet that you have in a black box out in the sun. Right? So a lot of these things that we're going to do, that when you do beekeeping, it's really, you have to just think of common sense. Would I put any of my pets in something that it's going to get so hot they can't breathe? So, or can survive. So you can see I put those 6 on there. And then I take these 2 little chunks of wood just for more weight, so this thing doesn't float around. I put them the other direction. And then I set a brick on top of that. Okay, now when they're in place, I peel off one of the tapes on one of those holes, and I set this in a shady spot in the yard. You do need to elevate it, and you need to make some type of legs, and then you coat the legs with this stuff called Tanglefoot. This is sold in all the nurseries. It's made to go around the trunk of trees, and it's a sticky, sappy material that doesn't dry out, and ants can't crawl up it. Ants in our county are the absolute worst predator for our bees. They're Argentinian ants. and they will devour everything in the hive, and they'll